Hello there, it's 6 a.m. I'm at Stansted Airport and I've got a flight to catch. And, there's my gate. I'll speak to you in a bit.
Welcome to Glasgow. Keep your seatbelt fastened and remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been switched off, doors are opened and you're ready to sit embark. Please take all your personal belongings with you by checking the seat pocket underneath the seat and the overhead locker.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. I hope I find you well. This is a bit of a special one, a special episode, one that I thought needed to be celebrated, and especially after our Lionesses' glorious summer of 2022. Now, back in 2019, just before the senior men's 1000th game, I put together an episode looking at the very first men's international that took place in November 1872 in Partick, Glasgow. That episode, well, it's still available at threelionspodcast.com or your podcast provider of choice. And at the time, I thought, I've done this. Now, at some point, I'm going to need to do the same for our women's team. Well, that time has come. And just as I did for that men's episode, I've once again come to Scotland. Not a cricket pitch this time, but a small sports stadium. It's called Ravenscraig Stadium on the edge of Greenock in Clydeside. Ravenscraig is about 25 miles away from the West of Scotland Cricket Club, where that men's game was played on the 30th of November, 1872. By pure coincidence, 100 years later, on the 18th of November, 1972, Scotland women faced England women. And it wasn't the first time women had played internationally, as back in April 1971, France had played the Netherlands. Now, I'd like to tell you some more about the women's game. But before I do that, I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, Ian Dyer. He is the Operations Manager for Community Facilities, Parks and Pitches for the Inverclyde Leisure, I believe.
That's correct.
And has kindly opened the gates for me today. Ian, thank you very much. Perhaps you could tell me a little about Ravenscraig.
Ravenscraig Stadium was constructed, I think, way back in the 60s by the local authority, the local council. Has then been the site of your football international that you've been talking about, but probably more recently is used for our local junior football team and is also used as an athletics track and stadium for the local population in Inverclyde. It's a fairly standard type of stadium. If we were trying to explain to your listeners what it would visualise it, just a stand, running track, football pitch, but set in a nice sort of leafy area of Inverclyde.
And it's changed over the years by all accounts with regards to like the running track around it.
Yeah, I think like everyone, everything has developed. So our running track is now no longer a blaze or a shingle track. It's now a proper polymeric track. That our floodlights are more improved and obviously suit both the needs of athletics and certainly for football. But intrinsically, it's not changed terribly much since, as we were saying earlier, when I was a youngster and coming here to run as part of the sort of school athletics programme.
We've seen there's some big new floodlights, but were there floodlights when this first game was played?
I'm going to be honest, I would imagine there would be, but probably not the way they are just now. As I say, they're on 2 tiers now, so that you can have low level and high level lighting. But my dim and distant memory of running around here, even outside of school, there would have been floodlights because we would have trained in the winter time. So they would have needed sunlight to obviously to help participants.
And it's still a stadium that's in use today?
It's still in use today. Our local junior team, Greenock Juniors, play here during the football season. As I've mentioned, the two athletics clubs, Inverclyde Athletics and Glen Park Carriers, both train here with maybe 100 odd children of each of the nights that they train, and that's 4 nights a week. And more recently just introduced American football to the stadium. So that's been fairly popular. And again, they're played in the off-season, so that's not conflicting with the football season. Ravenscraig Stadium's always been part of the local scene, so therefore, in my lifetime, it's always been here. It's always been a focal point for, as I've said, for the local junior football team. And Greenock Morton is obviously our local Premier team, and they've trained here in the past, but they've also come and played. They would normally have a derby game against Greenock Juniors, so every now and again, and that helps from a fundraising point of view for the junior club. Ironically, the Greenock Morton now train at partly at our 3G football stadium because again it's safe, and certainly coming through COVID, etc., it's easy to make it COVID compliant. But certainly, down here it is what it is, and used, probably could be used better. The local athletics clubs are keen to encourage new participation or increased participation. They've just sort of fitted a new pole vault track or pole vault equipment, which they use. But certainly, as far as football's concerned, as we were talking earlier on, the local council facilitated the under-15s girls international between England and Scotland as part of the celebrations of this unique landmark, at the 50th anniversary. I think it was a respectful 3-3 draw on the day. Scotland were up, they were up 2-0, I think, within the first 5 minutes.
Oh, right. Very reminiscent of the first game.
I think so, but played under terribly poor weather conditions.
Again, quite reminiscent, I think.
Typically for Inverclyde, you can only, the only thing you can't kind of control is the weather. But a good audience, spectators turned up, so I think there was over 1,000 people came to see that, supported by the local council, supported by Inverclyde Leisure, but supported by Scottish Schools FA as well. And from that, as we mentioned earlier on, certainly the Scotland squad then got a full cap and had a full cap celebration at our local town hall, which was good for those girls to a bit of pomp and circumstance to the whole event, which was good, and as it deserved, as a full international. But yeah, I think it was kind of reminiscent of the first game. But I think the referee blew the whistle just in time. I think England were certainly in the ascendancy after that. I think it could have certainly gone their way. But honours were shared, which was always good.
Well, that was obviously the under-15s game was much recently, but 50 years ago the first game between England and Scotland was played here, and well, I wish you all the best for the next 50 years.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Ian, thank you very much for your time.
Welcome.
Now, much like the men's, matches had been played before, some under the banner of England, but this is classed as the first official England women's match. And here we are, in 2022, it seems a perfect time to celebrate this match in what is its 50th anniversary. I've been fortunate to speak with a couple of people who helped make that first game go ahead, and you'll hear from them soon, and I'll also go for a wander around the ground here and describe what I can see. But before then, I'd like to tell you a little about the history of the women's game. It may have been the first official women's international match between the two nations, and now, fortunately, the women's game, both domestically and internationally, is flourishing either side of the border. But back then, women's football had seen some dark days. The late 1800s and early 1900s, the women's game was flourishing. Attendances of anywhere between 4,000 to 25,000 to 53,000 would turn out to watch the women. Dick Kerr's Ladies were one of the earliest and most successful sides. Founded in Preston in the northwest of England, they were the team of the locomotive and tramcar manufacturers, and later went on to produce munitions for the war effort. The team came about with the rise of the First World War, where the company became predominantly female-based. Football became a sporting activity for the employees. The men played, the women played. The women beat the men. Enthusiasm rose, and Dick Kerr Ladies were formed. They began to play other female sides, and they began to beat all those who came before them, mainly in charity fixtures to raise funds for injured servicemen from the war. Now, while this episode is about the first women's international between Scotland and England, played back in 1972, we can be pedantic or technical and say that Dick Kerr Ladies took part in the very first international, when they played a team from Paris in 1920. And one of the most famous players from those days was a lady by the name of Lily Parr. She was a winger. She died in May 1978, aged 73. But she wasn't forgotten. In 2002, she was the first female to be inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame at the National Football Museum. And then in 2019, the museum commemorated her with a statue. And it was Boxing Day 1920, same year as when Dick Kerr Ladies played that team from Paris, when the attendance of 53,000 was recorded. They played St Helens Ladies at Goodison Park, of course home of Everton, in Liverpool. However, just a year later, the English FA moved the goalposts. On the 5th of December 1921, they banned women from playing matches on their members' pitches, claiming that they were protecting women as they were not physically able to play the game. Although it was widely thought that it was a knee-jerk reaction to the growth of the women's game threatening the male game. The resolution passed by the FA's Consultative Committee stated, Article 5, Women's Football Matches. Complaints have been made as to football being played by women. Council felt impelled to express a strong opinion that the game of football is quite unsuitable for females and should not be encouraged. Complaints have also been made as to the conditions under which some of the matches have been arranged and played, and the appropriation of receipts to other than charitable objects. The Council are further of the opinion that an excessive proportion of the receipts are absorbed in expenses and an inadequate percentage devoted to charitable objects. For these reasons, the Council requests the clubs belonging to the association refuse the use of their grounds for such matches. That was a statement by the FA Consultative Committee. Although reading the excellent dickkerladies.com website, it also mentions some individuals who supported the FA's decision. Dr. Elizabeth Sloane Chesser said,
There are physical reasons why the game is harmful to women. It's a rough game at any time, but it is much more harmful to women than men. They may receive injuries from which they may never recover.
Dr. Mary Sharleb, a Harley Street physician, said,
I consider football a most unsuitable game, too much for a woman's frame.
And I'm not quite sure who Mr. Eustace Miles is, but he said, I consider football quite an inappropriate game for most women, especially if they haven't been medically tested first. Now, apparently there was a British real tennis player of the time with the same name, Eustace Miles. I don't know. if they are one of the same person. So for 50 years, women's football was officially banned in England, although through sheer ingenuity, women got around it by playing games on scrubland, rugby pitches or school fields. That was until 1971, when the FA finally gave in due to pressure from UEFA that there was no need for the game to be banned. Shortly before this, in November 1969, the WFA, the Women's Football Association, was set up. This organisation would continue until 1993, when of all people, the FA took control of the game. It's safe to say it's in a better place now than those early years under the FA's stewardship. But going back to the WFA and its inauguration, one of their earliest secretaries was a lady called Patricia Gregory, and she, alongside her Scottish counterpart, helped to arrange this first international fixture. I spoke to her about her memories of the time. I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast Patricia Gregory, who at the time of the first England Women's International back in 1972 was the secretary of the WFA. Patricia, hello there.
Hello. This will be the first, I think, of many this year, but because a lot of people are realising that this probably big anniversary is coming along.
It's quite momentous, really, 50 years.
Well, it doesn't feel like 50 years, but I'm sure everybody of a certain age says that. Yes.
Well,
yes. No, I was actually, just to be pedantic, I was honorary secretary of the Women's FA because we, in those days, and we're talking the early 70s, we didn't have any money, and we certainly didn't have any money to pay people to do the work.
So, obviously, the players wouldn't have been paid then?
Oh, heavens, no. No, in fact, I can't remember exactly, but I believe they would all, and all of us, and I went to the game, we would all have had to contribute to the costs because, as I've said, we had no money and grants were few and far between at that time. And sponsorship was certainly very difficult to get hold of.
So how did the game come about? Were you in charge of arranging it?
Well, shall we put it this way? I arranged the English end and a lady called Elsie Cook, she arranged the Scottish end. So they took the brunt of organising the actual match. But what we did, we actually didn't know at the time, but the first men's international, also between Scotland and England, was on, I believe, the same date in whatever the year would be in the 1800s.
That's right, so 1872.
Yeah, so it's very, very odd but that is a pure coincidence. I guess, I don't remember, I'm still in touch with Elsie.
Okay.
I guess that we didn't think, I'm sure we didn't think that this was an anniversary to mark. It's just pure coincidence. And we had been working for over a year with our organisation of trials. So we based our trials on our league system. And we had the leagues playing each other. And then the Football Association, who were by that time keeping an eye on us, shall we say,
right.
They recommended and we appointed a gentleman called Eric Worthington, who, as the manager, he was a senior lecturer at Loughborough College, and he had been a professional footballer at QPR in his time. And he was a very good coach, and he became the first England manager. Unfortunately for the WFA, we only had him for the one match. We didn't know that then, because he got a job in Australia.
Oh,
and so he only handled the squad for that first game, and then he disappeared off. But kept in touch with him, and I'm still in touch with his widow, because, of course, it's a long time ago. So I arranged the English end. The girls, we played at, I believe we played at Wembley Pool, now known as Wembley Arena, the night before our trip to Scotland, as an exhibition match in the Daily Express five-a-sides that was then run for the professional men's teams. And that we were the interval entertainment between the semi-finals and the final. And the girls, we gathered the girls together and we stayed at the Bisham Abbey National Sports Centre and then took a coach. We did all of this by coach. And so we went to Scotland by coach. So from Bisham Abbey, as we set off, I had arranged with the Football Association that we could stop off at Wembley Stadium. And the girls could, well, they were allowed to change in the changing rooms, walk up the tunnel. This is obviously the old Wembley, the original Wembley, and have a photo call on the pitch. And I still have a photograph of the team shot. In fact, I think it's the only photograph we've got of the team lined up in all their glory. But it was a great thrill for the girls, and for me, for that matter, to walk out onto the pitch, because you don't get to do that often.
No. And that was on the day of the trip going up there, was it? Or just prior to?
That was on our way, yes. We'd set off from Bisham Abbey in Marlow, Buckinghamshire, I think that's roughly where it is. And we stopped off at Wembley, and then we made our way back onto the motorways and up to Greenock.
Now, I think I've seen that picture that you're referring to.
You probably have, because it's quite famous, and it is the only one.
It looks quite bright for a November day.
Yes, it wasn't raining. No, I don't remember it raining. And the girls had a little kick around for the photographer. Sadly, I have no idea who the photographer was. Not a clue. But I'm guessing that at least the local press showed an interest.
Absolutely. So that must have been a good 8-9 hour journey, I guess, by coach, would it have been?
I can't remember, but it must have been. It was a long time. The only other longest coach journey I've made was in 1969 when I took the league team to Czechoslovakia, as it then was.
Wow.
That took a bit of a while too.
I can well imagine. So the game was in Greenock in Scotland. Was it in the evening or was it the afternoon?
No, it was an afternoon match, because 1972, I was employed as a secretary, well, something like that, very menial job in BBC Sport. And I obviously accompanied the team to Scotland, and the match was played on a Sunday, and ITV's equivalent of Match of the Day, The Big Match, was on. And Brian Moore announced in the programme that England had been beaten. This really set my hackles going. And I wrote, because you'll appreciate that's what you did in the 70s, you wrote a letter.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wrote complaining to ITV that what he had given out was the halftime score as the full-time score.
Wow.
And the following weekend, Brian Moore, who I later worked with, and he was a lovely man, he gave a very fulsome apology on the programme the following weekend. And my bosses at the BBC were so thrilled that I had made ITV apologise.
I can well imagine. Well, I mean, even for back then, though, for ITV or mainstream media to at least acknowledge the game, was good. I've also heard about the game that obviously it was November and there was quite a snow flurry.
Oh, it was really bitterly cold, and yes, there was a snow flurry and there had been snow, but it was sort of the bit like rain. So it was pretty cold. Yeah. And Sylvia Gore, who scored the first England goal. Well, Rose Riley, who is still hale and hearty, she scored the first goal, I believe, and I'm doing this from memory. Sylvia Gore scored the first England goal because she was always very proud that she was the first England goal scorer.
Too right.
Sadly, she died a few years ago.
Yeah.
But the other two scorers for England were Linda Hale, who again is very well and living in Southampton, and Jeannie Allett. She came from Crewe, and she scored the third and winning goal.
And so from that first game, which obviously England won, what was the feeling after the game for the girls?
Oh, they were delighted. Of course they were. It was wonderful. And there was a dinner in the evening with the Scottish team. So everybody was very friendly. No, they were tickle pink. What else can I say? They were very, very pleased.
And it was the start of a long journey then, and lots more games, as you say, under the WFA.
Well, we had a lot more. I can't give you the number off the top of my head, but I could work it out. I've got a list. The second game was our first trip abroad. We went to France in, I think it was April 74. But of course, everything we did, or indeed didn't do, was subject to the available money. Yeah. And as there wasn't very much money around, it was quite difficult. The girls contributed. I can't give you any facts and figures on how much, but we usually asked them to contribute some money until we got much more established and managed to get some, usually grant aid, not so much sponsorship, but grant aid from the Sports Council and the powers that be.
I've heard, though, that still there is the frustration or confusion that some people still don't recognise this 1972 match as the first game.
We know, as the official organisation running women's football at the time we're talking about, we know that we were the game in November, or the date in November, will be the 50th anniversary of the official. But you are probably aware that there were teams around who were visiting places, most notably Harry Batt's team from Chiltern Valley, Luton, who went to Mexico in 1971. Now, they were told clearly, because they were members of the WFA, that they could not call themselves England, and they called themselves the British Independents. But, of course, when they got to Mexico, they were called England.
Right.
And the British newspapers called them England. And I remember, even after all this length of time, I remember arguing with the national press here. One editor said to me, "Are they English?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, then they're England." So you that's a pitfall for you to be careful of.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the 1800s, there were matches which were purported to be Scotland v England, usually in Scotland, so Scotland v England. But, of course, there was no official organisation at that time, so they weren't England. Anybody could call themselves anything. As indeed, I suppose they can now, but it doesn't make them England. When the subject of these earlier games, when I say earlier than the 1972 match comes up, it upsets the girls who were the genuine England players, because they had to go through all sorts of trials. We had a final trial, and it upsets them that other people will claim to be England and they've appeared on television and this sort of thing. It is quite upsetting for them.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, come this anniversary, it'll be acknowledged in some way.
I hope and I expect that the FA will mark the occasion somehow, but I have no idea what that might be.
So here we are, back at the Ravenscraig Stadium, and I have a copy of the matchday programme with me, priced at a mere 5 pence. It is simply a piece of A4 paper folded in half, and on the front it says, "The Women's Football Association presents the very first Ladies International Football match. Scotland versus England at Ravenscraig Stadium, Greenock, on Saturday the 18th of November 1972. Kick-off 2:15 p.m. Thank you for your support." And as you open it up, the inside pages give the teams and some dialogue about each individual players. There's an opening message from the Scotland team manager, Robert Stewart, who says, "I would like to extend a warm welcome to our English guests this afternoon and hope that their visit to Scotland may be an enjoyable one. This being the first international between the two countries, I hope we shall have a good sporting game and be able to make this event an annual affair." On the next page is the England team and a message from the England manager, Eric Worthington, who says, "Even before the formation of the Women's Football Association in 1969, the aim of the organisers was to promote women's football at international level. We now see the realisation of this aim with today's game. Now, the England squad were selected from regional competitions and final trials, and at a training weekend, the present squad were selected. And as I mentioned, the teams, they were listed inside. And the lineups from that day were as follows. Scotland had Janie Horton. She was the goalkeeper. Jean Hunter, Jane Hunter, Linda Kidd, Marion Mount, Sandra Walker, Rose Riley, Edna Nellis, Mary Anderson, Captain Margaret Macaulay, and Mary Carr. And there were substitutes: Liz Creamer, Mary Davenport, Linda Cooper, Diane McLaren, Irene Morrison, and of course there was the manager Robert Stewart. And for the England team, the goalkeeper was Sue Bucket, Morag Kirkland, Sandra Graham, Janet Bagley, Sheila Parker, she was the captain, Paddy McGroherty, Linda Hale, Sylvia Gore, Pat Davies, Jeannie Orlott, and Jean Wilson. And the substitutes for England were Wendy Owen, Julia Manning, Eileen Foreman, and Susan Wyatt, and manager Eric Worthington. Now, before we go out and have a look around the ground and maybe sort of visualise what it was like 50 years ago, let's hear from England goalscorer on that day, Linda Hale, and her memories. Now, I'm delighted to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, goalscorer on that amazing day, that first day for the England women, Linda Hale. Hello, Linda.
Hiya.
Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast, a historic episode about a historic game in the women's football. What were your memories of the time?
I was 18 when I first got picked for England, and everything was all up in the air, and it was a really good sort of, we had training sessions, we had trials, and then you got the call up to actually play for England.
Right.
And on the sort of, I think it was about a week before, 4 or 5 days before, we went up to Wembley. We trained for photographs on Wembley, and we also on that time we played in a five-a-side between the I think it was a Daily Express five-a-side men's football tournament, and then we went up to Greenock.
So you actually got to play on the Wembley turf.
Yeah, we had a training session on the Wembley turf, and then a lot of photographs taken. And at the time, it doesn't sort of equate that that's where you are.
You were a player for Southampton at the time, who, by all accounts, were quite a successful team, were they?
Yeah, we were a good side. Won the FA Cup many a times, and it was a case of that we'd all sort of grown up together. Really, it was quite a young team. It was really good fun playing at that time.
Were there other Southampton players in the England lineup, other players that you knew, or were you on your own, really?
No. When we first got picked for England, there was 4 of us.
Right.
There was Sue Bucket, who was a goalkeeper. There was Morag Kirkland, who was a right back. There was myself and Pat Davies, who was the centre forward. 4 of us got picked together out of the Southampton team.
Wow, so that shows how good that Southampton team were.
Yes.
I spoke with Patricia Gregory, and she said that you all took the coach up to Greenock. Must have been an eventful journey.
Yes, yeah. I can't remember too much about it. I can remember staying in the hotel. I still got all the memorabilia of the hotel, the menus, everything. I've got all that.
Right. I read that you were described as a flying winger with a cannonball shot. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, I had a decent shot on me, and I can remember many years ago, I was at a football tournament, and I can't remember who it was. Somebody in the FA said that I had the shot like Peter Lorimer's.
Really?
Who used to play for Leeds.
Yeah. Were you taking free kicks?
Yes, oh yes, corners, free kicks.
So take us to the day of the game. It was a Sunday, and by all accounts, it was quite cold. I've seen some of the footage of it, and there was snow on the ground and snow on the hills in the background.
It was really, really cold. I mean, the ground was rock hard. That's how our winning goal got scored, where it was so rock hard, and Jeannie Ellett crossed the ball, and Pat Davis jumped in front of the goalkeeper, and it bounced over their head.
It was a bit of an up and under sort of shot, that one, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. Apart from sort of bits and pieces that come back when you get together with some of your mates that were playing in that, until we start talking, things then come back. I can remember my goal, but apart from that, I mean, not a lot I can tell you about, really.
Go on then. You can remember your goal. Talk us through it.
Talk a lot about Pat Davis, but she was my best mate, and we played for Southampton together all the time, and we played for England together. She got the ball on the halfway line and dribbled a bit, got it through into their half, and I was going down the wing. She saw that the pass was inside the fullback. I just ran straight onto it, and it went straight in the left-hand corner.
Because you were under pressure from a couple of defenders, weren't you?
Yeah. That was the equalising one, yeah.
That's right. And because Scotland had taken a 2-0 lead, hadn't they?
Yeah.
What was but that was before, obviously, Sylvia Gore scored England women's first ever goal. And then
That's right, yeah.
Then it was half time. What was the feelings at half time?
I think it was just the same as it would be in any situation, that we just had to pull together and make sure that we could get on top of them, because they had a really good player, and she was quite young, Rose Riley.
And she scored the first goal.
She was the one we had to watch most of all.
Right.
So she was a really good goal scorer.
Yeah. They came out for the second half. You got your goal to equal it up, and then was, as we say, Jeannie Ellett got the winner.
Yes.
How was it coming off the pitch knowing that you'd won that first game?
At the time, yes, you're elated that you've won, and it's not until years later that you really take in exactly what you've done. And as I said, look, sort of now, 50 years on, we're getting sort of so many people want to talk to us about it. You realise exactly what you did do back then.
Yeah, you were the ones who started it off for the players that are now representing the Lionesses now.
Yeah. What a change!
Well, yeah, times certainly have changed. Be it the size of the ball, the length of the halves, the cut of the kit, all those little things have just evolved over time.
Oh yeah, but the fact is that nowadays they're athletes. We were just players that got trained maybe once a week. Most of us had to buy our own kit at club level, just generally out there to enjoy ourselves and hoping, for success.
And after that, you went on to play more games for England.
Me personally, I played about 7.
Right.
I played the next one, which was France. And after that, I can't remember very many about them.
Right.
I know we travelled quite a lot. I quite enjoyed the travelling.
And did you travel a lot with Southampton as well?
Not abroad, no.
Right.
All around the country, obviously.
Yeah.
But there wasn't, when we first started, there wasn't that many football teams around anyway.
That's right. And now, obviously, 50 years on, what are your thoughts of the women's game now? Are you happy with the way it's come on, or should it be further on, in your opinion?
I think it's progressed in the last 3 or 4 years, because they've got so much television time, which through that is getting a lot more recognition. I doubt very much if they enjoy it as much as we did. I mean, it's very much more regimed, isn't it? What they can eat, what they can do, and whatever. I mean, we trained hard. I mean, you've got to admit that if Southampton won so many cups and what have you, we must have been good. And and that's it, training once a week. Yeah, that's not bad, is it? Where you've got them now training every day, sort of the thing is that the money aspect of it, I think I was born a little bit too early.
Yeah.
It would have been nice.
To take a few quid from it.
Yeah.
Well, but you've got the memories, and I say you've got all the memorabilia as well there.
Oh God, yeah.
Have you got your? Did they give you caps back then?
Yes, they did us caps, and this is something that we had a lady who came with us. Her name was Flo Belton, bless her. She's passed away. She embroidered them.
Oh, okay.
She made them out of sort of felt and embroidered them and had the England badge on it. And this is one of the things that at this moment in time, we're desperately trying to get our caps, the same as the men.
Yeah, in the same style.
Just the cap, yeah, exactly the same as what the men get. Yeah. Because the women now get the same, don't they?
Yes.
We just got an embroidered one.
That must have had its nice touch anyway, would it?
Yes, it's a nice touch. But again, we were under the FA. Why couldn't they give us surely the men that started before me in 72 must have had a cap not embroidered by somebody.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, there's no reason why you should have had something different.
Yeah.
Again, one of those ones I can't explain. Oh, well, Linda, thank you very much for your time, just giving us some memories of that day. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
So this is the away team dressing room where the England team would have got changed. Let's have a look in here.
Fairly standard changing room. Probably slightly different from what it was back in the 70s because they've put in a suspended ceiling.
Right.
But other than that, it is as it was back in the day. No single showers then. No single showers now.
No.
So it's a team changing room. So team showers.
It's just a small room, wooden benches, concrete floor, and hooks on around the wall. I mean, it's sort of non-league standard changing room. Well, there's a famous picture of an England player whose name escapes me, and she's doing her makeup somewhere in here. No, she was doing it. She was doing it on the bench.
Oh, right, okay.
Something like this.
Yeah. This is where it would be.
This is where it would have been, and there's a sort of a whiteboard on the wall, which wouldn't have been of the time. Maybe a chalkboard.
Might have been a chalkboard.
Yeah.
They might have just written on the walls.
Well, maybe. And this is the walk out to the pitch. As the tunnel to the pitch. You could imagine the studs on the ground as they came out to play. And as I come out, I think it's quite reminiscent of the day 50 years ago as the rain comes down.
It's England versus Scotland in the first ever Women's Football Association International at Ravenscraig Stadium, Greenock. And it's a far cry from the days when a lady fainted if a gentleman said damn. England in white shirts playing left to right. Scotland attack, and it could be first blood for the home team. England clear. Scotland take possession. A goal, and it's a broad day for bonny lasses and brass monkeys. Scotland again. A corner. And it's a goal. Scotland 2, England 0. Half-time and freezing. But now it's England's turn to attack. A goal. Scotland 2, England 1. And in this weather, the kissing and hugging almost makes sense. Now it's a blizzard and England move in for the kill. Another goal for England, and at the end of a grueling day, it's England 3, Scotland 2. No man could do better.
So I've come up into the main stand, and there is only one main stand here at the ground, and it runs along one side of the pitch, and it is elevated up, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 benches high, and they look onto the pitch as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 sections, as it were, along the side. There's There's sides, glass sides to each side of it, and if you've seen the footage of the game, of where the goals were scored, this would be where the camera was positioned. So from where I'm standing, I can see to my left was the goal where Scotland scored their opening goal. They scored one from the corner, and then to my right is where England scored their first goal in the first half. And looking just over the pitch, there's a sort of what looks like a concrete terrace of 5-6 steps that runs along the other side. It's all uncovered. The running track obviously goes around the ground as well. There's seagulls on the pitch, and beyond it there's sort of houses and sort of some schools at either end, which have since been built since the game was played. But this is the stadium as it was and as it is now. It's very little has actually changed. So it's still this piece of history. And it's good to be here, and I'll take some photos of it so that you can see it and visualise it for yourself as well.
As it's been mentioned, England's following game was away to France in April 1973, which they won by 3-0. And it wouldn't be until June of that same year that England would have a home match to play and be able to comment on that very first game. But that third game in June was once again against Scotland, played in Nuneaton on the 23rd. And the programme notes from that day said the following. The first official international played in Great Britain was held on November 18th, 1972 at Greenock between Scotland and England. The weather was bitter, the pitch icy, and half the match was played in a snowstorm. At half-time, Scotland were winning by 2-1, but 2 second-half goals enabled England to win the match by 3-2. Incidentally, England won that game in Nuneaton 8-0. And there we have it. I've got to head back to the airport now, but if you were to pass this stadium, and perhaps you do on a daily basis, there's nothing to mention of this particular game. Over at the West of Scotland Cricket Ground, there is a small plaque mentioning its significance. Perhaps it would be suitable to do the same thing here, mentioning that this is the site of the first game between Scotland and England women. Perhaps something for the authorities or the local council to investigate. Can't be too much red tape in that, surely. I've really enjoyed my day up in Scotland. I've finished it off with a walk along the Clyde, went and stopped off at Greenock Morton and St Mirren, and had a pint of Tennent's too. My many thanks go to Ian Dyer for his hospitality and his time. And my thanks also go to Patricia Gregory and Linda Hale for sparing me their time and memories. In this year 2022, 50 years on from that day, it seems appropriate that our Lionesses picked up the European Championships here on home soil and also qualified for the 2023 Women's World Cup. Seems crazy to think that the game was banned for those 50 years. Just think where it could have been had we not have had that situation. Fortunately, though, it has come on leaps and bounds since then, but understandable the frustration that was expressed at the time, and still is. The next 50 years are so important. The likes of Chloe Kelly, Lauren Hemp, Leah Williamson, and more, all paving the way, just as the likes of Sheila Parker, Linda Hale and Sylvia Gore did back in 1972. And all those along the way, the likes of Jill Coulthard, Marianne Spacey, Mary Phillip, Alex Scott, Farrell Williams, Jill Scott, Ellen White, to just mention some. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can follow the show on social media. Just search 3 Lions Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then by all means, do. Drop me a note, 3lionspodcast@gmail.com. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, I have also done an episode where I looked at the very first men's international. That one took place in 1872, and it can still be found at your podcast provider of choice. It's episode 66. Well, you should be able to find a link to it on Twitter by searching #England's First Game. My name's Russell Osborne. This has been a special episode looking at the very first England women's game here on the Three Lions podcast. I'll be back with you very soon with some more England content. I hope you can join me for it. So until then, take care. Cheers.